What's up, skeptics? Thomas Westbrook here. I gave the following talk at the Israeli Atheist Association's annual Machar Conference in Tel Aviv, Israel. Unfortunately, I lost my voice about a day before the conference because I had a nasty cold for about 10 days. If you like the work that I'm doing promoting scientific skepticism, then at the end of this video, if you enjoy the talk, please consider going to patreon.com/holykoolaid and pledging a couple bucks per video so that I can afford to get healthcare next year. It's completely optional. I'm going to continue putting out free videos no matter what on my channel, but it would help me out. Anyways, enough of me. Enjoy the talk. The story should start at the beginning. I'm sure you've heard this. The beginning is a good place to start. I'm going to do the exact opposite today, and I'm going to start at the very end, and I'm going to work my way backwards. The end of my videos. Every time I make a video on YouTube and I end the video, I end my videos by saying, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid. That sounds kind of weird. Why would I be telling someone not to drink Kool-Aid? Why would I be coupling that with an encouragement towards curiosity? Dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid. Well, in the 1970s, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Jonestown. I see about half of the room. There was a man who started a religious following, and he moved about 1,000 people to down to South America, and he told them that the government was coming, but they have to have this revolutionary act of protest as a religious organization, and he convinced his cult followers to drink Kool-Aid. It was a different drink, but everyone says don't drink the Kool-Aid because it was very similar. And he told them, we drink this drink. They drank it and they died. And you can see there, those are bodies, just over 900 people that followed this person to their death. That's some of the danger of cults. Some people look at religions and they say, well, a religion's not a cult, but oftentimes religions can be, or they can use the same type of control tactics, the same type of manipulation. They tell you, don't ask questions, don't doubt, don't think critically, just accept this with faith. Faith is a good thing. We have to take everything on faith, we just have to believe it. Scientific skepticism says exactly the opposite. It encourages doubt. It tells people that they should ask the hard questions. So when I tell people to dare to be curious, I'm telling you to go out and learn how the world works, but don't be so open-minded that you'll follow someone to your death. Dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid. Be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. So I'm going to ask you guys to do a quick favor for me. Can you guys stand up? I know it's been a long day, so I'm going to try to get everyone, awake. I'm going to say, dare to be curious, and you're going to shout, but don't drink the Kool-Aid, okay? And if I'm going to do it on Instagram, is that okay with you guys? Yeah. Okay. So we'll do a couple times real quick for practice. Dare to be curious.
But don't drink the Kool-Aid.
I think you can do better. Dare to be curious. But don't drink the Kool-Aid. One more time, and this time for Instagram. We're going to say it really loud. Dare to be... No. This is cold, guys. All right. Dare to be curious.
But don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Wonderful. You can have a seat. I'm posting that now. So what is scientific skepticism? Oftentimes people confuse it with other things. They think that to be a scientific skeptic, you have to be a scientist. This is just not true. They think that it's maybe knowing how everything works. In order to be a skeptic, you have to know all about the universe, you have to know everything. That's also not true. Is being a skeptic being cynical? Is it being just always negative and being like, oh no, that's not true, that's not true? That's also not what scientific skepticism is. And it's not being a contrarian. Scientific skepticism is not just always saying no. Scientific skepticism is demanding that the evidence matches the claim. So when someone puts forth a claim, they say, I can read your mind, They have not presented any evidence whatsoever. And that burden of proof has not been met. They need to prove that they can do what they say that they can do. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And the corollary to this is that which is presented with no evidence can be dismissed with no evidence. If you say that you are the second coming of Jesus Christ, I'm going to say, maybe. Prove it. I'm not going to say, oh, you're an idiot or you're a fool or something. I'll be like, all right, here's some water. I like Cabernet Sauvignon. Maybe you can do a little bit of Jesus work. This is a man who claims that he has pyrokinesis powers. He claims that he can light things on fire with his mind. So I'm going to play this video. He's presenting evidence, okay? He's taking a piece of paper. He says regular notepad. If any of you are familiar with magicians, you know that whenever they say something is normal, it means it's probably not normal. No wires, no chemicals. Maybe there's no chemicals. I don't see any wires. He stares at it for a little bit. Camera zooms in really close. Notice you can't see anything behind the camera. You have no idea what's going on anywhere except directly in his hand. But at the same time, after just maybe about a minute, something impressive starts to happen. The piece of paper starts to turn brown, and then it starts to get darker. And all of a sudden, out of magic, the paper bursts into flames. Extraordinary evidence or no? Why is this not extraordinary evidence? He just demonstrated it on camera. I see some hands going up. It could be CGI. I'm going to show you a couple of other alternative possibilities. The fact is, what is more likely? That this man has amazing psychic powers that no one else in the whole world possesses, that everything that we know about science and the world and the universe and the laws of physics is wrong, and that somehow the government hasn't taken this guy and hiding him in a bunker to use his magic powers and research and study on him, or that maybe he's lying, and maybe it's a trick. So this is one possible explanation, is that he's using lasers. Here's someone who created a device that uses infrared light. It's an infrared laser, which means there's some light that we can see, and then on one end of that, there's the ultraviolet that we can't see, and on the other end of it, there's the infrared that we can't see. So if you have a laser that's in the infrared spectrum, you can't see it, but it's still able to light things on fire if it's intense enough. So this guy points this laser at wood, and he causes the wood to light. Notice you can't see the laser. You can't see, red or green or anything. You just see fire starting. And he's able to set things on fire all the way across the field at extraordinary distances. He's able to burn through bottles with this laser. So is this one possibility for Grandmaster Wolf, that maybe he's using a laser? It's possible. But if I just come in and say, you're lying because it's lasers, is that really scientific skepticism? I haven't tested him. I don't know if he's using lasers. And if he comes forward and shows his room and shows his house and there's no lasers, then what do I do? How do I respond? Do I say, oh, I guess I was wrong, so I'm going to believe you now, and we're going to, follow your psychic abilities wherever it may lead? Or should we still demand that he presents proper evidence, proper testing protocols? To be a skeptic, we're not supposed to be skeptical just because we think that we know how everything works. We should be skeptical because we don't. Because many times there are many different ways that someone can be doing something. Most magicians have 10 different ways to do the same exact trick. So I wondered if I could recreate his experiment. I decided I was going to do some research. For about a month, I studied chemistry. I studied all the different possible pyrophoric chemicals. That means that when oxygen comes in contact with the chemicals, it lights on fire. So all the oxygen from the air is now coming in contact with the chemicals on the paper, and it's lighting on fire. Here's from another angle with another piece of paper. There's nothing hidden behind it. There's no wires, no chemicals. I can add text below my video too. It doesn't mean it's true. It's hard to see because the paper's bright and it's outside, but there are flames coming off of the paper. The fact of the matter is that all of us can be fooled. All of us can be deceived. Do you know who this man is? James Randi? James Randi has had a $1 million prize for over 50 years. I think God's calling, you should probably answer it. And this prize is for anyone who claims that they have supernatural or paranormal powers and abilities. For 50 years, he's been testing them. And for 50 years, not one single person has claimed the prize. Now, he understands how trickery works because he's a magician. He knows how people are fooled. So he puts in place proper testing protocols to make sure that he can catch trickery and that he can spot it and see it. For one example, instead of letting someone bring their own notepad, he would say, no, I'll provide the notepad. I'll give you my own notepad that has no chemicals. He would frisk the person or use metal detectors to make sure that they're not hiding anything on their body. He has a bunch of protocols in place to test people who have these claims. And if it's psychic abilities, the psychic agrees ahead of time, yeah, I should be able to do this, no problem. And every single time they fail, without exception. So how do we test someone like this? Well, we could go to his house, but he's probably going to refuse a test. He's probably going to say, no, I'm not interested. At the same time, we could, offer a prize and try to lure him in. This guy's probably not going to take it because he's trying to get views and attention and sign people up to some school that he has. I don't know what his prerogative is, but from everything that I've seen, I would be very surprised if he would submit to a test. We can, however, dismiss this guy's claims until he agrees to submit to a test like that, until he agrees to go to a scientific lab and under the right protocols and conditions, show that he has the abilities. And until then, the burden of proof has not been met. The fact of the matter is, though, even when we're testing things, our brains are wired against us. Our brains are very easily fooled. To give you one example of that, there's a famous experiment here called the monkey illusion. Now, I want you to watch this very closely and see how many times the people wearing white pass the ball. So count in your head, and whoever can get the right number, I don't know, you're awesome. How are you guys doing? Did you get 16?
I got 16.
You got 16? Well, but did you spot the gorilla?
Yeah.
How many of you didn't spot the gorilla? How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about?
I think it's because most of us know this video.
Now, how many of you saw the gorilla, but you didn't notice that the curtain changed from orange to red? This is an example of attention blindness. Our brains, we think that our eyes operate like cameras, that we take in every detail. They don't. You can see about that much with focus, and the rest is just outside of your brain's attention, outside of your focus. We miss so much information. Has anyone heard of the following? Can you guys all stand up real quick? And if you have not heard of one of these, then sit down. So everyone stand up. Have you not heard of sleep paralysis? Is there anyone who doesn't know what sleep paralysis is? Sit down. Everyone knows what this is? Surely some people don't. I'm sure a lot of people don't. How many people have heard of hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations? If you haven't heard of it, sit down. What about lab-induced out-of-body experiences? If you haven't heard of it, sit down. Carbon monoxide spiritual manifestations. If you haven't heard of it, sit down. It's okay to sit down. I expect everyone to be seated by the time I'm done. The ghost frequency. I mean, all of you guys are sitting down, so I'll just go through these. The Clever Hans effect, change blindness, focal aware seizures, Barnum statements and the rainbow ruse, ball lightning, collective effervescence, mass psychogenic illness, and collective hallucinations. Now, I realize that there's a bit of a language barrier, so some of these words maybe you've heard of in Hebrew, but not in English, and that's okay. The point of this is, I was showing this list to Alex, Cosmic Skeptic, earlier, and I said, have you heard of all of these? And I got to like the third one or the fourth one, he's like, no. Cosmic Skeptic. Skeptic is in his name. This is his job. He studies this stuff. And even still, there are things on this list that he hasn't heard of. That's normal. That is okay. The fact is, all of these things that I listed, if you're wondering what they are, these are all things that can explain paranormal things naturally with science. I'll give you a couple of examples. The ghost frequency. How many people know what this is? Only a handful of you guys. So just like how I was talking about infrared lasers, how some of the light we can't see because it's too high frequency and some of it we can't see because it's too low, sound operates the same way. So we have some sound that is ultrasonic and then infrasonic, I believe are the two. We can hear at about 20 hertz and up is the typical. There's a few people who can hear a little bit lower, have more sensitive ears. Most people, you drop below 20 hertz, they can't hear it. That doesn't mean that you can't still detect it, that your body still can't feel it. Now, there are places where they have had these claims that there are ghosts, and they'll say that there's a spirit in the room. And then they go in and they explore and they experiment, and what they find out is that there's a fan or something that is emitting this frequency of sound. It's right around 19 hertz. And what this sound causes you to do, it causes your body to start to feel a bit of panic. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Sometimes it can make your eyes a little bit blurry and you just feel really uneasy. And yet people who say that they feel like they have a ghost in their home have no idea, because they can't hear the sound, that it is nothing but sound. Sometimes when there's a storm and there's wind, the wind can cause this frequency of sound to be emitted and people feel uneasy. And it's perfectly normal, it's perfectly natural, and it's not ghosts. People who claim that there's spirits and ghosts have an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence. Another one I want to talk about is carbon monoxide spiritual manifestations. This one is very similar to the last one, except it's a chemical in the air. How many of you know carbon monoxide from cars that comes out the back, the exhaust? If you have a carbon monoxide leak in your home, it can cause the same effect in your brain where you start to feel really uneasy, and some people have even felt like they're seeing things or hallucinating. These are all very normal things, lab-induced out-of-body experiences. What people have found is that sometimes when you die and you are revived, people have a near-death experience. They think that they went to heaven. They think that they saw God. They think that they talked to Allah or to Jesus or whoever they believe in. But what scientists have found is that they can actually create the same out-of-body experiences using two different methods. One of them was done by Dr. Michael Persinger, and he called it the God helmet. And it's a helmet that they put on their heads, and it uses transcranial magnetic stimulation to trigger the temporal parietal junction. I know it's a lot of big English words, but like it caused people to hallucinate. And it caused people to have out-of-body experiences, to feel like they were outside of their own body. They've done the same exact thing using electricity. It's amazing the kinds of things that we can figure out using science. I don't expect for you guys to know every single thing, and this is a very short list compared to all of the things that actually are out there. Focal seizures, for example. Many of you are familiar with seizures. You know, someone falls down on the ground. We know that it's electrical activity in the brain. We also know that in most religious texts for centuries, people thought that seizures were demonic possession or witches. They said the demon seized him and he fell on the ground. Well, we know now that it's just a regular seizure. Well, a focal aware seizure is when you don't even know that your brain is having a seizure. So you can be sitting there and all of a sudden you start feeling like some weird presence of something else in the room. You start feeling like something is wrong, but it's really just that something is wrong inside your head. And it's perfectly natural. I don't have time to cover all of these, unfortunately, but the fact of the matter is that all of the gaps that we used God and spirituality and supernatural claims to explain are slowly being filled, and they're getting smaller and smaller every single day. People are starting to learn that we can know how the universe works. We can understand it. And even if you don't know, even if you're not an expert or not a scientist, that's okay. The trick is to start with a null hypothesis, to say, I'm not going to accept any claim until we can test it, until we can repeat that test, and until we can verify that this is actually how the world works. Sometimes we get that method wrong. And science is always in the business of trying to find better ways to test things, better ways to prove things, and better ways to figure out if the original test was accurate or if the original test was flawed. But the fact of the matter is that the phrase, "in God we trust," which unfortunately in America is on our currency and they've adopted it as a motto, needs to be replaced with nullius in verba. This is what's on the Royal Society's motto in London, and it means, it's Latin, it means, on the word of no man, do not accept something just because someone says that it's true. If it's true, truth withstands scrutiny. We should be able to go and scrutinize the truth and test it, and people shouldn't be afraid of the result. And I think that's where, when we have the conversation with religious people, we need to be starting with skepticism. Give them these tools, because it's much easier to come and have a conversation with someone about something like, ghost frequencies, or about, any of these supernatural things that I listed, and then they're like, oh, that's really interesting, and it instills some curiosity in them. And they realize that maybe something that they thought was supernatural wasn't. What if the other things that they believe, they also believe for the wrong reasons? And when you plant those little seeds of skepticism and doubt, then people actually start to go out and realize that maybe they can be wrong, and maybe it's okay to doubt, because this is a journey that we're on together. Where, even if you believe in a different religion from me, you're my ally, because we are working towards the truth together. And if we make it not me against you, but me with you searching for the truth, and we can agree that the truth can be tested and the universe can be known, then we're halfway there. We can't test everything. Sometimes we have to rely on experts and scientists. Sometimes some of the scientists get stuff wrong, but that's where the value of scientific consensus comes into play. There are things like dark matter and dark energy that are on the edge of our understanding that not every scientist agrees on. And then there are some things like the Earth is not flat that 100% of the scientific community agrees on.
Global warming.
Global warming is also right there. Climate change, the scientific community agrees on. Those are the things that we can start with and be like, we know this because we have so much evidence from so many different fields overlapping, and then we can work outwards from there and figure out how the world works. The purpose of scientific skepticism is not to debunk extraordinary claims, it's to ensure that they meet the burden of proof, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So as I said in the beginning of my video, dare to be curious. Thank you very much. Do you guys have any questions? Or do we have time for questions? One or two? Okay.
Yeah, I was actually, what you said reminded me of a conversation I had with a colleague that says that he started believing in God because he saw him while taking hallucinogenic drugs. So my response was, you mean to tell me that when your brain is impaired, you trust it? They said, no, it's not the brain is impaired, the brain is what is preventing us from seeing the truth, and when I impaired it, that's how I saw the truth. And I told him actually about the God helmet. So he said, that means the scientists now know how to talk to God. So I'm kind of at an impasse how to, address
here's a question.
attitude.
With Michael Persinger's God helmet, they've been talking about using the God helmet with virtual reality so people can play video games and have these spiritual experiences. My question is, once they start doing that, are they going to start worshiping Mario? That's a good question. Another way to test it would be to ask him, okay, if you take drugs and someone from different religion takes drugs, will you come to the same conclusion? If no, then God is pretty bad at, communicating.
I just wanted to make two small points. One, regarding this point, I think, and I'm by no means an expert on that, but from what I heard, at least certain hallucinogenics make people from very, very different backgrounds experience very similar spiritual encounters, meetings with sort of the same God. And what I would say to that is that maybe there is still the chance that indeed this claim that, it's our consciousness that stops us from experiencing reality, maybe it's true, but the burden of proof hasn't been met.
Yeah, and for something like that, I would say, okay, what are the commonalities? Because when they say we have very similar spiritual experiences, oftentimes they'll exaggerate it, and when you actually stop and break down the two claims separately, because when they're together, they converge on a common point. And this happens with people who have what's called group hallucinations. Yeah. An example of a group hallucination was, there's a book called SEAL Team 6, where a United States Navy SEAL team is being trained. These are some of the most intense warriors in the world. You would think that they'd be focused and they wouldn't be susceptible. And yet, during Hell Week, they're trained for 1 week almost without any sleep. And he tells this story of how him and his other SEAL teammates are in a boat and they're rowing, and all of a sudden one of them looks down and yells, "Sea monster!" And they all converge on this collective hallucination because they're so sleep deprived that all of them see a sea monster and they start hitting it with ropes, and then one of them pulls it out of the water and it was a net. It wasn't a sea monster. But it shows you that if they can fall for that, all of us are susceptible. So something like that, you would have to test people separately, but you would also have to ask, what's in common? Okay, they all say that they saw a light. Okay, well, we have light receptors in our eyes. That's not uncommon. They all have a feeling of like pressure on their chest. Okay, we all have the same anatomy. That's not uncommon. Like, what are the things that they're claiming? Is it that they saw Muhammad and he said that, he rode to Jerusalem on a horse? Like, I doubt that all of them are going to have details that detailed that are the same.
Yeah, no, I think it's usually not that done.
All right, sorry I don't have time for any more questions, but thank you guys so much. And I'll be around if you want to ask me more. Oh, one last question. When it came to the change blindness, at the beginning of this talk, I was wearing a suit. I don't know how many of you realized I changed. Dare to be curious.
Drink the Koolaid.
Thanks so much for watching to the end. Again, if you enjoyed this video and you appreciate the work I'm doing spreading scientific skepticism around the world, please go to patreon.com/holykoolaid and pledge a couple bucks to help support my work and help me afford some antibiotics. Or you can make a one-time pledge on PayPal. I'll put all the links to everything in the description below. Thanks again, and have a fantastic holiday season.